The air hung thick and heavy, like wet wool over the vast Lemoyne sugar plantation. That's where our story begins, deep in the sticky, beautiful hell of Louisiana, 1809. The heat itself was a character in this drama, pressing down on everything, stifling sound and sense, making even the grandest mansion feel like a sweatbox. In the center of this suffocating elegance stood a man named Silas. Silas was not built like the other enslaved men who worked the cane fields. He was tall, yes, and strong, but his power wasn't just brute force. It was coiled, silent, and hidden beneath a veneer of perfect, almost unnerving calm. He worked the main house, a position that granted him access to secrets and shadows the field hands never saw. He served the meals, polished the silver, and stood quietly in the corners, listening to the gossip, the financial worries, and the cruelties whispered behind cupped hands. Silas knew the Lemoyne family better than they knew themselves, and they, in turn, saw him as furniture, expensive, well-maintained, but ultimately inanimate. This misperception was the foundation of his entire terrifying plan. The Lemoyne family was defined by its 6 daughters, 6 sisters they called them, born one after the other, each one trained from birth to be a prize, a commodity to be traded for land and influence. They were the center of the Lemoyne universe, sheltered, draped in silks, and utterly profoundly bored. There was Elise, the eldest, sharp as broken glass, who saw marriage not as love, but as a hostile takeover. She craved control above all else. Then came Isabel, the beautiful one, whose vanity was her shield and her greatest weakness. She lived for admiration. Following her was Cecile, the quiet observer, always with a book, dreaming of worlds far beyond the humid confines of the estate, yet too timid to step into them. Next, the twins, Adele and Beatrice. Adele was fiery, prone to fits of temper and melodrama, demanding constant attention. Beatrice, her mirror image, was cold, calculating and cynical, already suspicious of every man who crossed her path. And finally, Marie, the youngest. Barely 17, she was still soft around the edges, filled with a desperate romanticism that made her the most dangerous target of all, because she still believed in magic and true feeling. 6 sisters, 6 different locks, but all leading to the same vault, the destruction of the Lemoyne name and Silas's freedom. Silas knew the risk was not just death, it was something far worse than the swift rope or the bullet. It was the slow, agonizing torture reserved for those who dared to touch the untouchable. But the weight of 1809, the weight of the chains, the memory of his mother sold away years ago, it demanded a fire, not just an escape. His plan wasn't merely to run, it was to dismantle the entire structure of the plantation from the inside out, using the very things they valued most: their pride, their honor, and their daughters. For months, Silas moved like a ghost. He didn't rely on charm. He relied on psychological precision. He studied their schedules, their favorite perfumes, the books they left open on the parlor tables. He understood that rich, sheltered women were starved for genuine connection, for someone to acknowledge the person beneath the elaborate gowns. They were tired of the fawning, sweating planters who spoke only of cotton prices and dowries. His opportunity began to crystallize around the annual summer solstice ball, a massive affair that would bring the entire planter class to the Lemoyne estate. But he couldn't wait for the ball. He needed to plant the seeds first. He needed to isolate them one by one, making each one believe she was the only one he truly saw. The first move was subtle, almost invisible. It happened in the library, a massive room filled with dusty, forbidden knowledge the Lemoynes rarely touched. Elise, the eldest, was there, trying to calculate the worth of her future husband's tobacco fields, her brow furrowed in concentration. Silas entered, ostensibly to dust the high shelves. He reached up, his muscles flexing easily beneath his thin linen shirt. He was silent for a long time, just the soft brush of the feather duster against the leather bindings. "Mademoiselle Elise," he said, his voice low, deeper than she expected, "you worry over the numbers, but the numbers lie." Elise froze. She looked up, startled. It was unheard of for a servant, especially one of his station, to address her so directly, so knowingly. "What did you say, Silas?" she demanded, her tone sharp, ready to dismiss him with a single cutting word. Silas didn't flinch. He lowered his gaze slightly, but his voice held steady like a deep, still river. "I said the balance sheets lie, mademoiselle. Your prospective husband, Monsieur Dubois, speaks of 20,000 acres. But I have seen his overseer's reports. The topsoil is failing on the eastern quarter. He is leveraging debt he cannot cover. His numbers are built on hope, not harvest." Elise stared. How could he possibly know that? These were private, complex dealings her own father struggled to keep straight. "You listen at the doors," she accused, her voice trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the thrill of the forbidden knowledge. "I see what is real, mademoiselle," Silas countered softly. "When you spend your life observing, everything becomes clear. I see the truth behind the smiles, and I see that you, Mademoiselle Elise, deserve a future built on solid ground, not sinking mud." He didn't offer to help her or advise her. He simply planted the seed of doubt and validated her deepest desire to be powerful, to be smarter than the men trying to control her. He made himself an ally, a silent, dangerous confidant, a source of forbidden truth. Then, without another word, he continued dusting, his breath steady, leaving Elise standing there, her calculations forgotten, her mind reeling with a terrifying, exhilarating realization. The enslaved man saw her. He understood her ambition. The next sister was Isabel, the beautiful one. Her weakness was her image. She spent hours in front of her mirror, agonizing over her complexion and the latest fashions arriving from New Orleans. Silas found her in the garden, pruning the heavily scented jasmine vines. Isabel was distressed. A new, expensive gown had arrived, a brilliant green silk, but the local seamstress had failed to fit the bodice correctly. It made her shoulders look too broad, a disaster for the upcoming ball. She sighed dramatically, tossing a silk shawl over the offending dress. "It is ruined," she lamented to the air, assuming the enslaved man nearby was deaf to her woes. Silas approached slowly, carrying a basket of clippings. "The dress is not ruined, Mademoiselle Isabelle," he murmured, his eyes lingering on the curve of her neck for just a second too long. "It is simply demanding attention in the wrong places." Isabel turned, annoyed, but found herself captivated by the deep, serious look in his eyes. "And what would you know of fashion?" she scoffed, trying to regain control. "I know that beauty is not what the fabric covers, but what it reveals," Silas replied, his voice a smooth caress. "That gown fights your grace. It hides the line of your collarbone, which is, forgive me for saying, the most exquisite line in this house." He didn't touch her, but the words felt like a physical touch. He had noticed something specific, something intimate, something the other men, blinded by her overall glamour, always missed. "The seamstress tried to force the silk to be rigid," Silas continued, stepping closer, his hands gesturing subtly without touching the fabric. "If the gathers here," he indicated the side seam near her waist, "were released by just a quarter inch, the fabric would fall, not cling. It would allow your movement to speak instead of silencing it." Isabel was stunned. He spoke of aesthetics with the precision of an artist. She looked at the seam, then back at him. His eyes were dark, intelligent, and entirely focused on her, not with lust, but with appreciation. "Can you do it?" she whispered, the desperation overriding her fear of propriety. "Can you fix it before Papa sees?" "If I may have a needle and thread, mademoiselle," Silas said, offering a small, almost imperceptible tilt of his head. I am accustomed to repairing things that others believe are broken beyond salvation. He took the gown, and in the space of half an hour, working with focused intensity in the sunlit sewing room, he transformed the garment. When Isabel put it on again, the silk flowed like water, accentuating her figure exactly as she wished. She looked at her reflection, then at Silas. Gratitude warred with deep, unsettling curiosity. She had received gifts of jewels and land deeds, but this small act of understanding felt more valuable, more dangerous. He had seen her flaw and fixed it, making her feel truly beautiful, not just admired. "You have a gift, Silas," she breathed. "I have eyes, mademoiselle," he corrected gently. "And I know the difference between something merely expensive and something truly priceless." He left her then, walking back toward the heat of the kitchen, leaving Isabel with the scent of jasmine and the dangerous knowledge that the most perceptive man on the plantation was the one forbidden to even look at her. The plan was working. He hadn't touched them, but he had entered their minds. He was no longer furniture. He was a secret, a shared intimacy. Cecile, the reader, was the next target. She was the most withdrawn, living in the world of poetry and tragedy. She was the easiest to ignore, and therefore the easiest to surprise. Silas knew she often slipped out after dark, sometimes sitting on the stone bench near the old abandoned slave cabins, reading by the light of a small lantern, feeling a perverse sense of freedom in the desolation. One evening, he ensured he was far from the main house when she made her escape. He approached silently, carrying a small, heavy book. Cecile looked up, terrified, seeing only his silhouette against the faint moonlight. She clutched the book she was reading, a forbidden French novel about tragic lovers. "Mademoiselle Cecile," Silas said softly, stopping a respectful distance away. "Forgive my intrusion. I saw your light." "Go back to the house, Silas," she commanded, trying to sound firm, but her voice wavered. "You will be whipped if you are found here." "I am already whipped, mademoiselle," he replied, the simple truth striking her heart like a cold stone. "But I did not come to risk your reputation. I came because I saw what you were reading yesterday." Cecile frowned. "How could you know?" "I cleaned the parlor," he reminded her. The spine was creased at page 47, a passage about the necessity of beautiful lies. He stepped slightly closer, holding out the book he carried. It was old, brittle, and bound in faded leather. "This is for you," he said. "Or rather, the words inside are. It is a collection of ancient Greek philosophy, the words of Epictetus. He was also a slave, mademoiselle. He wrote of the things that are truly in our power and the things that are not." Cecile took the book automatically. Her fingers brushed his, a fleeting spark in the darkness. The touch was entirely accidental, yet it felt monumental. She held the heavy volume, confused. "Why?" she whispered. "Because you live in books, mademoiselle," Silas answered, his eyes seeming to pierce the night. "And a mind like yours deserves to know that even in chains, the true self can be free. Epictetus understood that the only cage that matters is the one we build for ourselves." He turned to leave, melting back into the shadows of the pecan trees. "Silas!" she called out, a desperate plea. He paused, looking back. "Where did you learn such things? How do you read Greek?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips, a rare and devastating sight. "I learned by watching the masters fail to appreciate what they owned, mademoiselle. Knowledge is the only true currency." He left her sitting on the cold stone, holding the ancient book, her heart pounding not with fear of discovery, but with the sudden, overwhelming connection to a man who saw her intellectual hunger and fed it, defying all the rigid rules of their world. He hadn't tried to court her, he had challenged her mind, and that was a seduction far more potent than any flattery. 3 down, 3 more to go before the night of the ball. The pressure was immense. Every successful interaction increased the risk of discovery, but Silas was running on pure, cold adrenaline. He knew he was playing a game of hours against years of conditioning, and he had to win the next three sisters quickly before the whispers started. The twins, Adele and Beatrice, required a double approach, a strategy that played on their rivalry and their deep, unspoken bond. They were inseparable, yet constantly competing for attention. Silas caught them together in the sunroom, arguing quietly over a misplaced letter, their voices tight with frustration. "He promised me the first dance," Adele wailed, stamping her foot. "He promised us a future," Beatrice corrected coldly. "And your foolish emotional outbursts will ruin the negotiations, Adele. You are too visible." Silas entered, carrying a tray of iced tea, placing it down with deliberate slowness. He saw the tension, the raw, exposed nerves of their rivalry. "Mademoiselle Adele is correct," Silas stated, surprising them both. Adele's face brightened instantly, while Beatrice narrowed her eyes. "And why would you say that, slave?" Beatrice challenged, her voice dripping with contempt. Silas met her gaze directly, a dangerous move. "Because attention is power, Mademoiselle Beatrice. You try to hide your ambition, to mask your desires with a cool exterior. But the world only rewards those who demand to be seen. Mademoiselle Adele, with her fire, she understands that visibility is leverage," Adele preened, basking in the unexpected compliment. "See, Beatrice, even he knows." Silas then turned his attention fully to Beatrice, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial murmur that excluded Adele entirely, despite her presence. "But Mademoiselle Beatrice," he continued, "you understand the true game. Visibility is leverage, yes, but invisibility is the ultimate shield. You are the quiet strategist. You are the one who truly moves the pieces on the board, while your sister draws the eye of the crowd. You are the true power in this room, because you know how to wait, how to manipulate without being suspected." He had split them perfectly. He had validated Adele's need for drama and attention, making her feel seen and appreciated for her fiery temperament. But he had given Beatrice something far more valuable: recognition of her superior intellect and cunning. He had confirmed her belief that she was the hidden force, the smarter sister. He had created two separate private alliances in a single moment. He was their secret supporter, their silent judge, affirming the unique quality each sister believed defined her. "The greatest players are never on the stage," Silas concluded, picking up the empty pitcher. "They are the ones writing the script." He walked away, leaving the twins in stunned silence. Adele felt empowered, ready to cause a scene at the ball. Beatrice felt understood, ready to plot her subtle domination. Both were now bound to him by the intoxicating lure of validation. Only Marie remained, the youngest, the most romantic, and thus the most fragile piece of the puzzle. Marie spent her days wandering the overgrown portions of the estate, whispering secrets to the moss-draped oaks, dreaming of a life where passion trumped propriety. She was desperately lonely, yearning for a grand, cinematic love that the dull planters of Louisiana could never offer. Silas knew her patterns. He knew she left small, half-finished poems tucked into the crevices of the old stone fountain. He waited for a rainy afternoon when the house was quiet and the air was charged with the smell of wet earth. Marie was sitting by the window, staring out at the downpour, her chin resting in her hands, looking utterly miserable. Silas brought her a cup of hot chamomile tea, something he knew she favored. As he set it down, he paused. "The rain," he said softly. "It is a heavy cloak for a light spirit, Mademoiselle Marie." She looked up, startled. "It is just rain, Silas." "No," he insisted, his eyes warm and empathetic. "It is the world mourning the beauty it cannot hold. You feel things too deeply, mademoiselle. You feel the pain of the world, and it settles upon you like this grey sky." He reached into his pocket and produced a small dried jasmine flower he had preserved from the garden. It was a tiny, fragile thing, perfect in its imperfection. "You look for great tragedy, for grand passion," he murmured. "But sometimes the greatest love is found in the smallest details, in the flower that survives the storm." He placed the dried jasmine carefully on the windowsill next to her tea. "You write of freedom and stars, mademoiselle," Silas continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "But you are afraid to step into the dark. You are waiting for a hero to come save you, but you do not realize that the hero is already within you. You are the only one who truly sees the world as it should be, filled with color and feeling. Do not let them drain the color from you." Marie's eyes were wide, glistening with unshed tears. No one had ever spoken to her soul like that. Her parents spoke of duty, her sisters spoke of power, the planters spoke of land. Silas spoke of her inner world, her hidden poetry. He saw her yearning, her fragility, and instead of mocking it, he validated it as strength. "You understand," she breathed, the words sounding like a confession. "I understand loneliness, mademoiselle," Silas replied, his gaze intense yet respectful. "And I understand the courage it takes to dream when everyone else insists you remain asleep." He gave her a slight, almost imperceptible bow and retreated, leaving the youngest sister holding the dried flower, her heart aching with a sudden, overwhelming sense of shared destiny. He had established himself not as a potential lover, but as a soulmate, the one person who truly understood the depth of her sensitive nature. 6 sisters, 6 secrets, 6 hooks set deep. Silas retreated to the suffocating heat of his small room near the kitchen, the sweat running down his back, but his mind cold and sharp. The first phase was complete. He had seduced their minds one by one, giving each exactly what she craved most: power, beauty, knowledge, attention, cunning, and soul connection. Now he waited. The summer solstice ball was only 3 nights away. That was when the true catastrophic phase of his plan would begin. He needed all 6 of them simultaneously to believe that he was their singular secret confidant, their only true admirer, and their key to escape the gilded cage. He had planted the seeds of desire and rebellion. Now he needed the explosion. The destruction of the Lemoyne legacy was imminent, and Silas knew he had already passed the point of no return. His life was forfeit, but the cost of their ruin would be worth it. The 3 days leading up to the summer solstice ball were not merely days. They were a tightening coil of tension that wrapped around the Lemoyne estate. The air itself seemed to hum with the unspoken, the forbidden. Silas, moving through the house, felt the change in the atmosphere like a shift in the weather. The sisters were distracted. They were restless. They were, worst of all for their parents, secretive. Monsieur Lemoine focused on the endless ledgers and the sheer expense of throwing such a massive party, a party designed to flaunt wealth he barely possessed, missed the subtle tremors beneath his roof. But Madame Lemoine, who had spent a lifetime navigating the fragile egos and rigid rules of Creole society, noticed. She saw Elise, her eldest, usually so focused on her ledgers and potential suitors, now staring blankly out the window, a small, calculating frown etched on her face, as if she were weighing an invisible risk. She saw Isabel refusing to eat, agonizing over whether her new green gown was truly perfect, yet dismissing the compliments of her mother with an impatient wave of the hand. The worst were the twins. Adele and Beatrice were usually locked in public combat, but now they exchanged sharp, knowing glances that cut Madame Lemoine out of their world entirely. They were sharing a secret, and that secret was far more dangerous than any petty rivalry. Silas had to maintain the illusion of 6 separate exclusive relationships while working 20 hours a day preparing for the ball. It was a dance of pure exhaustion and calculated risk. He had to move constantly, reinforcing the unique bond with each sister, ensuring that their vanity and their need for privacy kept them from sharing their forbidden confidence. For Elise, it was a moment in the dining room. As he cleared the breakfast plates, he leaned in, his voice barely audible above the clatter of silver. "Monsieur Dubois arrived in town last night, mademoiselle. He settled a large gambling debt before dawn. Your father does not know." Elise's eyes flashed with fierce intelligence. The knowledge was power. She didn't need to ask how he knew. She only needed to know that he was her eyes and ears in the dirty, real world of finance. "Thank you, Silas," she whispered, her voice husky with a dangerous gratitude. He had confirmed her suspicion. He was her key to controlling her destiny. For Isabel, it happened in the hall. She was descending the grand staircase, practicing her entrance for the ball. Silas was polishing the banister nearby. He paused his work and simply watched her. When she reached the bottom step, she expected a compliment about her movement, but he offered something more specific. "The way the light catches the emerald clasp on your glove, mademoiselle," he murmured, his gaze sweeping over her quickly, professionally. "It is magnificent. It makes the others seem like glass." It was a tiny detail, but it proved he hadn't just seen the dress. He had seen the entire presentation, focusing on the small, strategic element she had chosen to elevate her look. He saw her effort, not just the result. Cécile, the quiet reader, was the easiest to maintain contact with because her world was paper. Silas left the Greek book on her bedside table, but tucked inside was a small, folded piece of vellum. On it, written in a careful, precise hand, was a single line of poetry from the forbidden French novel she had been reading. "The chains are only real if the mind accepts the weight." Cécile found it and pressed the note to her chest, her breath catching. He was speaking her language, confirming that their connection was intellectual and profound, transcending the vulgar reality of their stations. The twins were a challenge, demanding 2 separate performances in quick succession. He found Beatrice first in the pantry, supervising the counting of the imported wines, a task she undertook to show her superior management skills. "Mademoiselle Beatrice," Silas said, counting bottles alongside her, "I have observed the seating arrangement for the dinner. Your mother placed you directly next to the aging Baron de Montaigne, a safe but predictable choice." Beatrice bristled. "She always underestimates my value." "Indeed," Silas agreed, lowering his voice. "But the true power is not where you are seated, but who you choose to speak to. The Baron's nephew, young Monsieur Valerius, is positioned at the far end of the table. He is the one who truly controls the shipping lanes, not the Baron. A brief, private word with him during the receiving line, mademoiselle. That is where the real negotiation begins." Beatrice's lips curved into a cold, satisfied smile. Silas had given her a roadmap to circumvent her mother's control and seize a strategic advantage. Minutes later, he found Adele complaining loudly to a maid about the placement of flowers in the ballroom. "It is utterly devoid of drama," she wailed. "The entire room is beige." Silas stepped in, dismissing the flustered maid with a look. "The room is not beige, Mademoiselle Adele. It is merely waiting for its star." Adele looked at him, intrigued. "You are the drama, mademoiselle," Silas insisted, his voice passionate and intense. "The colors you wear, the way you move, the very air you disrupt with your presence, that is the spectacle they crave. Do not waste your energy on the flowers. Save your fire for the center of the room. They will talk about nothing else for a year." Adele felt a rush of heady validation. He saw her as the essential element, the necessary chaos. He wasn't trying to calm her. He was encouraging her magnificent self-absorption. Finally, Marie. He found her in the conservatory, watering the orchids. "I have been thinking about the flower you left me," she confessed, her voice soft. "The jasmine. It smells of freedom." Silas nodded slowly. "Freedom is not a place, Mademoiselle Marie. It is a moment of choice. Tonight at the ball, everyone will be playing their assigned roles. They will be actors in a play written long ago. But you, mademoiselle, you have the heart of a poet. You must choose to write your own scene. Choose the unexpected. Choose the beautiful lie that becomes the truth." He had given her permission to be reckless, to embrace the romantic fantasy she craved, positioning himself as the embodiment of that beautiful lie. The night of the summer solstice ball arrived like a tidal wave of silk and sweat. Hundreds of carriages rolled up the long, dusty drive, disgorging the entire planter aristocracy of Louisiana. The mansion, usually silent and oppressive, was flooded with light, music, and the heavy, cloying scent of expensive French perfumes, mixed with the humid air and the sharp tang of cheap champagne. Silas was everywhere. He served the punch, he directed the footmen, he ensured the ice was constantly replenished. He was the invisible engine of the event, and in his invisibility he found his power. Monsieur Lemoine, wearing a tight, uncomfortable expression, worked the room, his smile fixed, his mind calculating how many advantageous marriages he could secure by dawn. Madame Lemoine monitored the social hierarchy, ensuring the right people spoke to the right daughters. The sisters, draped in their finest gowns, played their parts expertly. Elise was serious and engaging, discussing land yields. Isabelle was a vision of controlled beauty, accepting compliments with practiced grace. Adele was loud and vibrant, drawing all the attention. Beatrice was cool and aloof, observing everyone from the edge of the crowd. Cécile was lost in a corner, pretending to read a fan, and Marie, the youngest, looked tragically beautiful, yearning for something that wasn't there. But beneath the surface of their composure, they were all waiting for the noise to reach a crescendo, waiting for the crowd to offer the necessary cover, waiting for Silas. He had timed his moves with the precision of a Swiss clock. He knew the moment of maximum distraction would come after the midnight buffet, when the older guests would be heavy with food and drink, and the younger set would retreat to the gardens or the quieter corners to engage in the socially acceptable flirtations. Silas's plan was built on the assumption that the sisters, having been primed for weeks, would be desperate to escape the rigidity of the ball and seek their secret confidant, the only man who truly saw them. His first target was Elise, the eldest, the most difficult and the most dangerous. Elise had endured 2 hours of tedious conversation with Monsieur Dubois, the man her father intended her to marry. Dubois was sweating and repetitive, speaking only of his cotton profits. Elise's ambition felt stifled, her intellect insulted. She needed a moment of true dangerous power. Silas found her near the conservatory entrance, feigning interest in a potted fern. "Mademoiselle Elise," he said, his voice a low thrum against the backdrop of the waltz music. He didn't look at her. He was adjusting the drapery nearby. "Silas," she acknowledged, her voice tight. "This man, Dubois, he is a fool. My father is blind." "Your father sees only the immediate profit, mademoiselle," Silas countered, never stopping his work. "But you see the long game. You need a partner, not a master. And you need information they think is too complex for your mind." He paused, then added the crucial piece of bait. "There is a ledger, mademoiselle, kept hidden in the small safe in the library study, behind the portrait of the first Lemoine. It details the true extent of your father's debt to the Parisian banks. With that knowledge, you could negotiate your own dowry. You could choose your own terms." Elise's eyes widened. That ledger was the holy grail of family secrets. It was the key to true independent power. "How would I access it?" she whispered, her heart hammering against her ribs. Silas finally looked at her, his dark eyes intense. "The key is kept on Monsieur Lemoine's person until he retires, but the noise of the ball, a small distraction at the right time. It could be found." He made a subtle gesture toward the back hall. "The old smoking room, mademoiselle. It is locked and unused. Wait there for 10 minutes. I will bring you the key." He didn't promise love or passion. He promised her control. And that was the greatest seduction of all for Elise. Elise nodded, her breath shallow, her mind already racing with the logistics of the betrayal. She slipped away, melting into the shadows of the back hall, her expensive silk gown rustling softly against the dusty walls of the abandoned smoking room. She didn't question the risk. She only tasted the power. Silas glanced at the grand clock. 12:45 a.m. Elise was secure. His next target was Isabel. Isabel had watched Elise leave, noting the strange, furtive departure. A flicker of jealousy and superiority crossed her face. Elise was always so clumsy in her ambition. Isabel was suffering. The green gown was magnificent, but a competing planter's daughter, Mademoiselle Beaumont, had arrived wearing a dazzling diamond necklace that stole the room's focus. Isabel felt diminished, her carefully constructed beauty eclipsed. Silas approached her where she stood, near a large decorative fountain in the main hall. "Mademoiselle Isabel," he said softly, holding a tray of empty glasses. "Mademoiselle Beaumont's diamonds are merely stones cut by a jeweler. They are cold." Isabel looked at him, her eyes pleading for validation. "She is blinding the room, Silas." "She is blinding the fools," he corrected gently. "But the true artist knows that the light should come from within, not be reflected from without." He lowered the tray and leaned close, his voice dipping to a thrilling, intimate level. "The garden, mademoiselle, by the old stone well. The moonlight there is soft, not harsh. It will catch the curve of your neck and the silk of your dress in a way that no diamond ever could. It will make you look like a goddess carved from moonlight." He had offered her the stage she desperately craved, away from the competition, where she could be the singular focus of a discerning eye. "Now," she whispered, the excitement overriding her fear. "Now," Silas confirmed. "The music is loudest. Everyone is looking toward the buffet. Go quickly. I will meet you there in 5 minutes. I must see you in that light, mademoiselle. I must witness true beauty unbound." Isabel didn't hesitate. The promise of being truly seen, of being elevated above the petty competition, was irresistible. She slipped through the tall French doors and into the humid darkness of the garden, the scent of jasmine heavy around her. 12:50 a.m. 2 down. Silas moved with a chilling efficiency. He found Cécile exactly where he expected her to be, tucked into the large, dusty library, pretending to examine an atlas while secretly holding his handwritten note in her hand. She looked up, her expression a mix of nervousness and yearning. "Silas," she breathed, "I cannot tolerate this noise. I wish I were 1,000 miles away." "You are already there, Mademoiselle Cécile," he replied, leaning against the doorframe, ensuring no one could enter without his notice. "But tonight you must choose to live the poetry, not just read it." He gestured to the massive, leather-bound volumes that lined the walls. "All this knowledge, mademoiselle, and yet you remain caged by the opinions of men who have never read a true page in their lives. The philosophers spoke of freedom of the mind, but they also spoke of the necessity of action." He pulled a small, heavy key from his pocket. Not the library key, but a key to the rarely used attic staircase. "Upstairs, mademoiselle," he instructed, his voice low and compelling. "The old attic. It is dark, quiet, and filled with the ghosts of this house's past. Go there. Wait. I will bring the book of Epictetus, and we will talk of how a woman of knowledge can break the chains of expectation. He was offering her the ultimate intellectual adventure, a forbidden meeting in a hidden place, discussing profound philosophy. For Cécile, this was the highest form of intimacy. But the risk, she stammered, clutching her book. The risk is the price of genuine thought, mademoiselle, Silas said, pushing the key into her palm. Her fingers brushed his again, a longer contact this time. Choose the risk, Cécile. Choose the truth. Cécile, driven by her deep desire for intellectual escape, swallowed her fear and rose. She used the noise of a passing servant to cover her exit, slipping up the narrow, winding staircase toward the oppressive silence of the attic. 12:55 a.m. 3 down. The critical window was closing fast. He needed the twins next. They were still together, but their alliance was brittle, fueled only by their shared secret knowledge of Silas's attention. They were in the ballroom, near the edge of the dance floor. Adele was pouting, having been ignored by a handsome naval officer. Beatrice was watching the exchange with cold satisfaction. Silas approached, carrying a fresh tray of drinks. He addressed Adele first, his voice loud enough to be heard over the music, but framed as a conspiratorial whisper. Mademoiselle Adele, he said urgently, you are magnificent, but the naval officer is a coward. He is afraid of your power. Do not waste your fire on him. Adele's eyes flashed. He is afraid of me. Of course, Silas confirmed, leaning in further. True passion frightens the ordinary. You deserve a moment that is purely about your emotional truth, a moment of grand, tragic feeling that this dull party cannot offer. The stables, mademoiselle. The air is clear there. Go to the third stall. Wait for me. I need to tell you how truly unique you are, away from these trivial people. He appealed directly to her melodrama, her need for grand, private recognition. Adele, craving the high emotional drama, readily agreed, slipping out the side door near the kitchens, eager for the scene Silas promised. As Adele left, Beatrice turned to Silas, her face a mask of suspicion. You flatter her too much. She will ruin everything. Silas met Beatrice's gaze, his expression changing instantly from passionate supporter to cold, calculating accomplice. She is the necessary noise, Mademoiselle Beatrice, he murmured. She draws the eye, but you and I know the true work happens in silence. He handed her a small, heavy velvet pouch. This contains the receipts from the cane sale that your father hid from the family lawyer. If you present this to the lawyer before dawn, you can legally secure your own portion of the inheritance, bypassing your father's control and Elise's scheming. Beatrice's hand closed around the pouch. This was real power, not poetry or flattery. The study, mademoiselle, Silas instructed, his voice now purely business. The small parlor study, where the contracts are kept, the one with the green velvet chairs. Wait there for me. We will review the documents and plan your presentation to the lawyer. Do not let Adele's noise distract you from the true prize. He had given Beatrice the reward for her superior intellect, complex, valuable information, and a plan for financial independence. She slipped away, the velvet pouch feeling like a weapon in her hand, heading for the parlor study. 1 a.m., 5 down. The ball was reaching its fever pitch. The music was loud, the dancing frantic, the guests blurred by drink and fatigue. Silas had less than 5 minutes before he had to begin the critical phase of his plan, moving between the 5 secured locations. He found Marie near the edge of the terrace, looking out at the moonlit cane fields, her face pale with longing. Mademoiselle Marie, he said, his voice dropping to a seductive whisper filled with the promise of destiny. They are all trapped here. They are all chasing money and status, but you are chasing the soul. I hate this, she confessed, her eyes glistening. I hate the lies. I want something real. Then take it, Silas urged. Tonight is the night of magic, mademoiselle. The night the rules break. There is a place far from the house where the ancient oaks meet, near the river bend. It is where the stars shine brightest and where the air smells only of freedom. He took her hand, a forbidden electric contact, and squeezed it gently. Go there, Marie. I will meet you. And tonight we will speak of true love, of escape, and of the life you were truly meant to live, the one where passion is everything. He had offered her the grand romantic gesture she had dreamed of since childhood, the escape, the soul connection, the forbidden tryst under the stars. Marie, consumed by desperate romanticism, nodded, her eyes wide with trust. She pulled her hand away, lifting her skirts, and fled the terrace, running toward the dark, inviting promise of the river bend. 1:05 a.m., 6 sisters secured, 6 separate locations. The stage was set for the night that would shatter the Lemoyne legacy forever. Silas stood on the terrace, watching Marie's white dress disappear into the gloom. He took a deep, steadying breath. The air was heavy with the possibility of ruin, both theirs and his. He had promised each sister exactly what she needed, knowing that the fulfillment of those promises would lead to their absolute destruction. He didn't have time for fear. He only had time for execution. His task now was to move quickly and flawlessly through the 6 rendezvous points, delivering the final catastrophic blow to each sister's carefully guarded heart and reputation. The plan was not merely seduction, it was psychological demolition, timed to coincide with the peak of the Lemoyne social showcase. He adjusted his thin linen shirt, feeling the sweat cool instantly on his skin in the night air. The music from the ballroom seemed muffled, distant, as he turned and walked purposefully toward the back hall. First stop, Elise, waiting in the dusty smoking room for the key to her power. The clock was ticking, and the destruction was about to begin. He adjusted his thin linen shirt, feeling the sweat cool instantly on his skin in the night air. The music from the ballroom seemed muffled, distant, as he turned and walked purposefully toward the back hall. First stop, Elise, waiting in the dusty smoking room for the key to her power. The clock was ticking, and the destruction was about to begin. Silas slipped into the smoking room, pulling the heavy door shut behind him. The air was stale, thick with the ghosts of forgotten cigars. Elise stood rigid in the darkness, her silk gown a pale shadow, her ambition burning like a small, hot coal. "The key, Silas," she demanded, her voice low and sharp. "Did you get it?" Silas moved closer, not hurried, but deliberate. He was no longer the servant, he was the dealer in secrets, and she was desperate to buy. "The key is still on your father, mademoiselle," Silas murmured, his breath close to her ear. "He is too drunk to notice, but too cautious to leave it unguarded. We must create a diversion so massive that the entire house turns its attention away from the library." Elise frowned, her mind running through scenarios. A fire? A fight? Too crude, Silas dismissed. "We need scandal. We need something that strikes at the very heart of their honor, something they must suppress immediately, before the guests leave." He placed his hands lightly on her shoulders. The touch was brief, shocking, and entirely unauthorized. Elise tensed, but did not pull away. The promise of power was stronger than the fear of impropriety. "You must accuse Monsieur Dubois of cheating at cards, mademoiselle," Silas instructed, his voice hypnotic. "Not a small sum, but a massive one, enough to bankrupt him and shame your father for considering the match. Do it loudly, in the center of the ballroom, right after the next waltz ends. Your father will have to drag Dubois away, and the resulting chaos will empty the library long enough for me to retrieve the key." Elise stared up at him, her eyes wide with the thrill of the plan. This was not just business, this was war. "And you will get the ledger," she whispered. "I will get the ledger," Silas promised. "But Elise, if you do this, there is no turning back. You will be marked as a rogue, a woman who defies her father and destroys a man's reputation. You will own your freedom, but you will be utterly alone." He leaned closer, his dark eyes penetrating the gloom. "Tell me you are ready to pay the price of true power, Elise." "I am ready," she breathed, the words a vow. Silas smiled, a quick flash of white in the darkness. He gave her shoulder a final conspiratorial squeeze. "Go, the waltz is ending. Strike fast. I will wait for your signal." He opened the door just enough for her to slip out, watching her straighten her gown and walk with a terrifying determination back toward the glittering noise of the ballroom. Elise believed she was marching toward independence. Silas knew she was marching toward public disgrace. 1:15 a.m. Elise was launched. Silas moved swiftly to the next location, the small parlor study where Beatrice waited. Beatrice was seated at a writing desk, the velvet pouch resting on the green velvet surface. She had already opened it. She was examining the papers inside with a calculating frown. Silas entered without knocking. "Mademoiselle Beatrice," he said, closing the door softly. "The moment is upon us. Have you reviewed the documents?" "They are confusing," Beatrice admitted, her voice tight with frustration. "These figures, they don't reconcile with the latest Kane reports. And this signature, it looks forged." Silas walked around the desk, leaning over her shoulder to examine the papers, a proximity that should have earned him a whipping, but which Beatrice allowed because he was her co-conspirator. "The forgery is the point, mademoiselle," Silas explained, his voice low and intense. "Your father is not merely in debt. He is committing fraud to hide the extent of his losses from your mother and the banks. These receipts prove he has sold off acreage that legally belongs to the estate's trust." Beatrice's eyes glowed with fierce understanding. This was the true game, financial treachery. "If I expose this now, the scandal will ruin the Lemoyne name forever," she stated, not with horror but with icy satisfaction. "Precisely," Silas confirmed. "And the lawyer is here tonight, mademoiselle. He is drunk, yes, but he is present. You must call him in here immediately, show him these documents, and demand that he secure your portion of the inheritance before dawn. Frame it as saving the family, but ensure your own control is solidified." He placed his hand on the documents, his fingers brushing hers. "This is the moment of truth, Beatrice. You must act with speed and ruthless logic. The lawyer is in the dining hall, near the punch bowl. Go, summon him now. Do not let him see the documents until you are both alone in this room." Beatrice rose, gathering the papers with a determined grip. She believed she was seizing her financial future. She believed Silas was her strategic partner, guiding her to victory. "I will return immediately, Silas," she promised, her eyes shining with cold ambition. "I will be here, mademoiselle," he assured her, watching her leave the study and head straight toward the dining hall, the velvet pouch held tight. Beatrice was now committed to a course of action that would expose the fake fraud and ensure her own financial ruin, while simultaneously dragging the family lawyer into the mess. 1:25 a.m. Elise was creating chaos in the ballroom. Beatrice was enlisting the lawyer. Silas had to move quickly to Isabel. He slipped out of the house and onto the manicured lawn. The air was cooler here, but the noise of the party still bled through the French doors. Isabel was waiting by the old stone well, bathed in the silver light of the half-moon. She was posed perfectly, her green gown shimmering, looking every bit the goddess he had promised. "Silas," she whispered, her voice laced with drama, "you took too long. I thought you had abandoned me." Silas approached her slowly, his eyes fixed on her. He didn't speak of ledgers or lawyers, he spoke the language of aesthetics. "Forgive me, mademoiselle, but I had to ensure the light was perfect. Look at you. You are flawless. You are art." He circled her slowly, his gaze intense, making her feel like the only object of value in the entire world. "This ball," Silas continued, his voice low and caressing, "it is a vulgar market. They are looking at you, yes, but they see only the price tag. They see the land you represent. They do not see the sublime curve of your collarbone or the fire in your eyes." Isabel sighed, completely mesmerized. "I hate them. I hate the way they look at me." "Then deny them, mademoiselle," Silas urged, stepping closer. "True beauty must never be owned. It must be worshipped freely." He reached out, his hand hovering near the shoulder of her dress. "They expect you to marry Dubois, to become Elise's sister-in-law, to fade into the background of a tedious life. Your beauty deserves a pedestal, not a cage." He dropped his voice to a thrilling whisper. "I have arranged for a carriage, mademoiselle. It waits on the North Road. If you leave now, before the first light, you can travel to New Orleans. You can become an artist's muse. You can live a life where your only value is your perfection." Isabel gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Escape. A life dedicated to her own beauty. It was the ultimate romantic fantasy, tailored perfectly to her vanity. "But I cannot simply run," she stammered, fear warring with desire. "They will chase me. They will shame me." "Then you must leave them with a spectacle, mademoiselle," Silas insisted. "A final, unforgettable moment that proves you are too glorious for their mundane world. Go back to the ballroom. Find Monsieur Dubois, the man who would cage you, and publicly, dramatically refuse him. Declare that your beauty is not for sale. Then, and only then, slip out and take the carriage on the North Road. No one will follow a woman who has just destroyed her own reputation in such a magnificent, self-serving fashion." He made the destruction of her own prospect seem like the most beautiful, courageous act imaginable. "A spectacle," Isabel murmured, her eyes distant, already envisioning the scene. "A refusal that will be spoken of for years." "A masterpiece of defiance," Silas confirmed. "Now go, Isabel. Be the artist of your own ruin." He watched her glide away, her silk rustling, heading back toward the main house, ready to commit a social suicide that she believed would immortalize her beauty. 1:35 a.m. Three sisters were now actively engaged in public acts of destruction. The house was moments away from erupting. Silas needed to secure Cécile before the chaos reached the attic. He re-entered the house, using the servants' staircase to avoid the main traffic. The sounds of the party were louder here. Shouts, laughter, and the beginnings of raised voices, suggesting Elise's confrontation with Dubois had already begun. He climbed the dark, narrow stairs to the attic. The air was heavy, dusty, and silent. Cécile was sitting on an upturned crate, clutching the heavy book of Greek philosophy. Her eyes were wide, reflecting the small, flickering light of the lantern she held. "Silas," she whispered, relief flooding her face. "I thought you were not coming. The noise below, it is terrifying." "Terror is only the lack of knowledge, Mademoiselle Cécile," Silas said, stepping into the circle of light. "You have the knowledge. Now you must use it." He sat across from her, the gesture intimate and equal. Epictetus wrote that the only way to be free is to understand what truly belongs to us. Our thoughts, our actions, not our possessions, not our names, not our estates. Cécile nodded eagerly. "Yes, the external world is a distraction." "But the external world holds the chains, Cécile," Silas countered, his voice earnest. "To prove your mind is truly free, you must perform a symbolic act that rejects the material prison they have built for you." He reached into his pocket and produced a small, rolled-up document tied with a faded ribbon. "This is an old, insignificant inventory of the family's silver," Silas lied smoothly. "It is worthless, but it represents the obsession with possessions that defines the Lemoyne name." He also produced a flint and steel, the tools he used to light the kitchen fires. "Burn it, Cécile," he instructed, his voice compelling her to intellectual action. Burn this symbol of their material world. Prove to yourself that the only thing that matters is the freedom of your own mind. It is the ultimate act of philosophical rebellion. Cecile looked at the flint and steel, then at the document. Her hands trembled, not with fear of fire, but with the magnitude of the symbolic act. To burn the past, to step into true intellectual freedom. It was overwhelming. "If I do this," she whispered, "I am truly free." "You are truly free," Silas confirmed, "because you choose the power of thought over the power of things." Cecile took the flint and steel. With a sudden surge of conviction, she struck the flint. Sparks flew, catching the dry edge of the document. The paper caught quickly, curling into bright orange flame. Cecile watched, transfixed, as the ribbon turned to ash. Silas watched her face, noting the pure, dangerous euphoria of the intellectual radical. "Now, Mademoiselle Cecile," he said, rising, "you must go. You have made your statement. The smoke will soon be noticed. Go back to the library. Pretend you never left. Let the world below deal with the consequences of your freedom." He led her to the attic door, ensuring she started down the hidden staircase. But the document was not an insignificant inventory. It was the original land deed for the entire Lemoyne estate, a crucial, irreplaceable legal document detailing the boundaries of the plantation. Its destruction would throw the entire Lemoyne land ownership into immediate chaotic doubt, ensuring years of crippling legal battles. 1:45 a.m., 4 down. The chaos was building to a crescendo. Silas could hear faint shouts of alarm from the floors below. He had to assume that Elise's accusation and Beatrice's strategic move had already begun to destabilize the party. He descended the stairs and headed back outside toward the stables, the farthest point of the immediate estate. Adele was waiting in the third stall, which smelled strongly of hay and horses. She was pacing nervously, her fiery temperament already bordering on hysteria. "Silas, where were you? I thought you forgot. I'm suffocating in this place," she burst out the moment she saw him. "I was securing our future, Mademoiselle Adele," Silas replied, his voice low, urgent, and filled with shared passion. He moved into the stall, closing the door behind him. "The party is a lie," he declared, his eyes burning with intensity. "The men are pigs. Your father is a tyrant. Your true life is one of grand, tragic love, Adele. A love that defies all these tedious rules." Adele's breath hitched. This was the high drama she lived for. "I want to run away with you," she whispered fiercely. "We cannot run, Adele," Silas confessed, his voice heavy with false despair. "Not yet. They would hunt us down and destroy us. Our love is too magnificent for this world to tolerate. We must prove its depth first." He took her hands, his touch electric, forbidden, and entirely focused. "You must create a scene so profound, so emotionally devastating, that it shatters their perception of reality. You must prove that you are willing to sacrifice everything for truth and passion." "What must I do?" she demanded, ready to weep, ready to rage. "The naval officer who ignored you," Silas said, leaning close. "He is speaking now with Monsieur Lemoyne. You must accuse him publicly of attempting to dishonor you, of trying to drag you from the ballroom, of whispering obscenities." Adele gasped, covering her mouth. "That is a lie." "It is a beautiful lie, Adele," Silas corrected, his eyes intense. "A lie that reveals the greater truth, that you are a passionate, magnificent woman, willing to risk everything for your honor. Your father will be forced to challenge the officer. The scandal will be immediate, immense, and irreparable. You will be the center of the greatest drama this house has ever known." He released her hands. "Go, Adele. Be the tragedy. Be the magnificent scandal that sets the world on fire. Your passion demands nothing less." Adele, intoxicated by the promise of being the tragic heroine, lifted her chin, her eyes blazing with theatrical fury. She flung open the stable door and ran back toward the mansion, ready to unleash a torrent of accusations that would lead to a duel and shatter the Lemoyne social standing. 1:55 a.m., 5 down. The house was now in full crisis mode. The scent of wood smoke, Cecile's symbolic act, was beginning to drift down from the attic, adding a layer of physical panic to the social chaos. Silas had only one more contact to make before he had to execute his own escape. Marie, waiting by the river bend. He bypassed the house entirely, cutting through the shadows of the cane fields, running toward the river. Marie was sitting by the moss-covered oaks, looking small and fragile in the vast moonlit landscape. She was the one he felt the least malice toward, but her destruction was the most necessary, for she was the one who truly believed in the fantasy. He approached her quietly, his breathing ragged from the run. "Marie," he whispered, sitting beside her on the cool, damp earth. "I am here. I am sorry I took so long. The house is collapsing." "I heard shouting," she said, her voice trembling. "What is happening?" "The lies are ending, mademoiselle," Silas said, his voice soft, filled with false tenderness. "Your sisters are finally choosing truth over duty, but we must be faster. We must escape this place entirely." He took her hands, holding them tightly. "I have secured the money and the horses. We must cross the river now, tonight. We will be free by dawn." Marie looked at him, her eyes shining with tears of relief and adoration. "You are truly saving me, Silas." "I am saving us, Marie," he corrected. "But I must go back one last time. I must ensure the path is clear and that the horses are ready. It is too dangerous for you to approach the house now. The chaos is too great." He rose, pulling her to her feet. He pointed down the riverbank, where the water flowed dark and fast. "Wait for me there, by the bend, where the crossing is shallowest. Stay hidden. I will return in 15 minutes. When I call your name, you must be ready to run into the water. We will start our life tonight under the stars." He kissed her hand, a gesture of profound, heartbreaking tenderness. It was the only true physical touch he allowed himself all night. It was the final, devastating lie. "Do not move, Marie. Do not doubt. This is our destiny," he commanded. Marie nodded, utterly captivated by the drama and the promise of eternal love. She walked toward the river bend, her white dress catching the moonlight, the perfect tragic heroine of her own making. Silas watched her go, the mask of the lover dropping instantly to reveal the cold, exhausted strategist. He did not turn back toward the house. He turned toward the dense, dark woods that bordered the river. He had no horses, no money, and no intention of ever returning for Marie. Her absence would be discovered by morning, and the shame of having run off with an enslaved man would be the final, crushing blow to the Lemoyne family's honor. 2:10 a.m. 6 sisters were secured, each one having committed an act of social or financial self-destruction, believing they were advancing their own unique agenda with the help of their secret confidant. Silas knew the time he had bought was running out. The smoke from the attic, the shouting in the ballroom, the discovery of the missing deeds, the public shaming of Dubois and the naval officer, the entire structure of the Lemoyne world was collapsing simultaneously. He had promised freedom, and he was about to claim his own. He reached the edge of the woods. He still needed to secure the final piece of his plan, the escape route and the ultimate public revelation of his success. He had one last person to contact, the only person outside the family who knew the full extent of his plot and who held his ticket to true, permanent freedom. He plunged into the thicket, moving silently, leaving the sounds of the collapsing plantation behind him. The air was now filled with the distant, frantic ringing of the house bell, the universal signal of catastrophe. The ball was over. The destruction was complete. Now, only survival remained. Silas ran, not just from the Lemoynes, but toward the future he had ruthlessly carved out of their ruin. He ran toward the small, hidden cabin deep in the swamp, where his accomplice waited. The price for the Lemoyne daughters had been paid in full. The currency was their reputation, and the buyer was freedom. The escape was now underway. The bell was ringing, not the gentle chime for dinner, but the frantic, hysterical clang reserved for fire or invasion. Imagine the scene, my friends, the absolute catastrophic climax of the summer solstice ball. In the grand ballroom, the music had sputtered to a halt. Elise, the eldest, stood in the center of the polished floor, her face pale, but her voice ringing out like a judge's gavel. She had accused Monsieur Dubois, the prized suitor, of cheating her family out of thousands in a card game, naming dates and amounts with terrifying precision. Dubois, bloated with champagne and rage, was sputtering denials, while Monsieur Lemoyne, realizing his entire financial lifeline was being severed, was dragging his future son-in-law toward a back room, shrieking about honor and reputation. But that was only the beginning of the noise. Just as the crowd began to process Elise's shocking betrayal, Adele, the fiery twin, erupted. She pointed a trembling finger at the handsome naval officer, her voice soaring into a magnificent theatrical wail, accusing him of the most heinous, dishonorable advances. The officer, a man of rigid military pride, instantly demanded satisfaction, a duel at dawn. The social contract was dissolving into blood and gunpowder. And now, listen closely, because the ruin was spreading. Beatrice, the cold strategist, had cornered the elderly family lawyer in the dining hall. She presented the forged documents, demanding he secure her inheritance based on her father's supposed fraud. The lawyer, already 3 sheets to the wind, took one look at the papers and began shouting about embezzlement, threatening to call the authorities to seize the estate's assets right then and there. Financial panic mixed with social humiliation. Then came the smell. The unmistakable acrid scent of wood smoke drifting down from the attic stairs, mingling with the expensive perfumes. Madame Lemoyne, already faint from the triple assault on her family's reputation, looked up just as Isabelle, the beautiful one, made her grand entrance, or rather, her grand exit. Isabelle stood on the main staircase landing, perfectly positioned, and announced in a clear, carrying voice that she refused to marry any man in this vulgar company, declaring her beauty too sacred to be bought by land or title. She threw her silk gloves onto the floor, a gesture of ultimate disdain, and then fled the scene entirely, running out the front door and toward the North Road, leaving behind a wake of stunned silence and burning shame. And Cécile, the quiet reader, was discovered minutes later by a terrified maid, sitting calmly in the dusty library, a faint smudge of ash on her cheek, whispering about the freedom of the mind, having just incinerated the Lemoyne land deed. The entire Lemoyne world, built on fragile debt, social pretense, and the commodity of their daughters, shattered in the space of half an hour. Monsieur Lemoyne collapsed in the back hall, realizing that his fortune was gone, his daughters were ruined, and his land was legally undefended. Madame Lemoyne was screaming, not in sorrow, but in impotent fury at the annihilation of her life's work. But Silas was already far away from the screaming and the smoke. He ran through the dark cane fields, the sharp leaves slicing at his thin clothes, the frantic ringing of the house bell fading behind him, becoming a muffled, triumphant sound. He knew the chaos he had unleashed was enough. They wouldn't organize a serious search until morning, and by then, the trail would be cold. Silas reached the edge of the deep cypress swamp, where the air grew even thicker, smelling of rot and life. He plunged into the shadows, navigating the twisted roots and the black water with the practiced ease of a man who knew the land better than the masters who claimed to own it. Deep within the swamp, hidden by a curtain of moss and heavy vines, was a small, crudely built cabin. Inside, a lantern burned low. Silas pushed open the rough wooden door. "Bastion," he said, his voice ragged. A man rose from the single stool, a free man of color, older, with eyes that had seen too much sun and too much injustice. Bastien was a river pilot, a man who navigated the hidden waterways and knew the clandestine routes north. He was Silas's only true confidant, the final piece of the plan. "The house is burning," Bastien stated, not as a question, but as a fact. "The house is ruined," Silas corrected, wiping the sweat and grime from his face. "Socially, financially, completely. The daughters are scattered. The father is broken. They will spend the next year fighting lawyers and each other. They will not spend a moment looking for me." Bastien nodded slowly, a rare, grim smile touching his lips. "The price was paid, Silas. I heard the chaos all the way out here." "And the papers?" Silas asked, his focus absolute. Bastien reached under the cabin floorboards and pulled out a tightly wrapped packet of oiled cloth. "They are done. A new name, a new history. You are now Elias Thorne, a free man from Saint-Domingue, arrived via New York. You are a skilled carpenter. These papers will hold up to a quick inspection." Silas took the packet, his fingers tracing the edges of the false documents. This was the true currency of his life, not gold, but paper that claimed his humanity. "The river is high tonight," Bastien continued, pulling on a heavy coat. "The flatboat is waiting a mile down. We move now. By dawn, we will be 30 miles north, past the checkpoints." Silas looked down at his hands, the hands that had polished silver, served wine, and touched the forbidden skin of 6 sheltered daughters. He had used those hands to dismantle an empire. "Marie," Bastien prompted gently, "did she go to the river bend?" Silas paused, the memory of Marie's trusting, romantic eyes flashing in his mind. He had left her waiting for a soulmate who would never return, exposed to the humid night and the eventual discovery of her betrayal. "She is waiting for a hero," Silas said, his voice devoid of emotion. "She is waiting for a beautiful lie. Let her wait. Her shame is the final piece of the Lemoyne ruin. If I return for her, they have a trail. They have a focus. My freedom requires her absence." It was the coldest truth of the night. Silas had used Marie's deepest romanticism as a shield for his own escape. They left the cabin, extinguishing the lantern. They moved through the swamp, Silas following Bastien's sure footing. When they reached the hidden flatboat, the sky was a deep velvet black. The river was silent, a vast, powerful highway leading north. Silas stepped onto the boat, turning back only once toward the distant lights of the Lemoyne estate. A faint, flickering glow against the horizon, already looking like a dying star. He had promised the sisters power, beauty, knowledge, cunning, drama, and love. He had delivered none of those things, but he had delivered the one thing he truly possessed: destruction. The Lemoyne Plantation, that monument to Southern pride and cruelty, would not recover. The land deed was ashes. The finances were chaos. The daughters were scattered, socially radioactive, each one convinced that her private, forbidden interaction with Silas had led to her unique downfall. Elise was fighting her father's debt. Beatrice was fighting the lawyer. Adele was dealing with a potential duel. Isabel was a runaway social pariah. Cécile was descending into philosophical madness. And Marie was lost, the ultimate symbol of the family's dishonor. Silas, or Elias Thorne, sat in the small boat as Bastien pushed off, guiding them into the strong, dark current of the Mississippi. He was free. The chains were gone, exchanged for a new name and the memory of a single calculated night of ruin. He had not run from slavery. He had destroyed the masters who embodied it. As the flatboat slipped silently into the night, carrying him toward the uncertain promise of the north, Silas did not look back. He looked forward, his dark eyes fixed on the distant stars. He had paid the price, and the price was everything the Lemoynes held dear. His freedom was forged in the fire of their shame, a chilling testament to the power of a single, calculating mind against the rigid world of 1809 Louisiana. He was gone, leaving behind only the smoke, the chaos, and the lingering dangerous memory of the enslaved man who had taught 6 sisters the true meaning of ruin.